Hey folks, I've been in IT professionally for over 2 decades, but honestly, I've been doing IT since I could walk. And after all this time, I think I'm finally starting to understand what this industry actually is, and more importantly, what it isn't. Real IT isn't about having the right certs or knowing the right port numbers off the top of your head. It's not about typing faster in PowerShell or speaking fluent CLI while blindfolded in a data center. Real IT is just making things work, especially when they really shouldn't. It's story time. I'm actually wearing my very first Hawaiian shirt that for some weird reason I saved. I got this in middle school. If I stood up, you'd all laugh because it fits me like a belly shirt, and totally unplanned. It was just on my desk. I'm using a vintage 80s Duncan potentiometer as a fidget toy. This, no doubt, is easily a $300 new old stock part now on eBay that I am just playing with like it is a 30-cent Timu fidget spinner. My point being, I have been dabbling in electronics and IT quite literally before I could properly read. When I was a kid, my dad would bring home all of the math department at school's computing technology because I didn't want to leave it in the unair conditioned building. And that meant I had early access to pretty much every Apple product, DOS product, impact printer, floppy based whatever, and mostly educational based math software, which is not nearly as cool as it sounds when you consider this was in the 80s. But I didn't just use them, I tore them apart. Before I was old enough to even leave my neighborhood alone on my bicycle, I had my first soldering iron from Radio Shack, and I was already tearing open Apple IIe's because they had these expansion card slots and they had green wire on it that someone soldered, and that meant that I could do stuff. I can still manifest the smell of rosin core solder in my brain. Saying that right now, I am smelling it. I took crappy solid core copper project wire and daisy chained little speakers I had pulled out of whatever I could and tried to learn Ohm's law the hard way and make some sort of sound system out of a boombox that I had available to me in the early 90s. I used green wire to do circuit wrapping after somebody gave me an old CanaKit booklet that talked about that. I didn't really understand what I was doing, but I wired together things that I couldn't really figure out how they worked or if they worked out of stuff I wasn't supposed to touch. I broke pretty much anything electronic in the house that we did not use every day and tore it apart. My uncle had left a bunch of his stuff with my parents when he came back from Vietnam, and I destroyed a beautiful vintage reel to reel tape player by taking it apart piece by piece because I wanted to figure out how every single component functioned. And if you see me somewhere, ask me about the very first time as an unsupervised child a TV flyback transformer sent me flying across the room, and I learned more about electricity in that moment than I probably ever learned in my adult life. And it's a miracle I'm still alive. There's the literal first 15 years of my life I spent desoldering old electronic boards, marinating in lead solder fumes because I genuinely had no idea that was a problem and the fumes smelled like progress. Seriously, pay attention to what chemicals your kids are smelling while they're desoldering in their bedrooms, parents. What are you even doing? There's a time I'm not proud of when I decided confidently I was going to build my first computer from scratch, where I got a 400 megahertz AMD processor because it was all I could afford. That's back when AMD was for hip, young, cool kids and not when it was, the man and part of the problem. And I had wired it up to this terrible, terrible, full ITX board with ISA slots, and there was these little jumpers and I couldn't figure out what they did. The book said what they did, but I didn't believe the book. They were for setting the IRQs and I could not get it right. And twice I had to go to get my dad to drive me to the local computer shop so I could pay some dude at the counter to literally set the IRQs to what it said in the book because I didn't believe that book was true and those dip switches actually did what they said they did. I was that kid growing up, learning technology, putting it together, hacking. I love parallel ports, parallel everything. In fact, I miss parallel everything because For those that don't know, brief side tangent, parallel ports or parallel data transfer, one wire does one thing and it's labeled on the data sheet with what it does. It's the fucking dream. If a wire says that it is the like plus 5-volt data bus, that's all it is. It doesn't do anything else. There's no serialization. There is no conditional state. It is either doing the thing or it is not. I loved all of that. Everything made sense. Things told you what they did. That was the world I grew up in, and that was the IT that I learned. By middle school, I was helping rewire our entire school from AppleTalk over to Ethernet. And in high school, I was migrating us from Token Ring over to 10BASE-T. I wasn't hired, I was a student, but for years, I still didn't think what I was doing was real IT. Because in this industry, there's a myth. This quiet little cult of purity that says only certain people count, or really more, only a certain way of doing IT counts. If you're not doing it from the command line, you're not really in IT. If you use the GUI, you're faking it. If you bought a solution instead of building it yourself, you're cheating. If you don't have the right certs, the right socks, the right mechanical keyboard, you are just a poser. It's a lie, but it's a persistent lie. I wasted almost a decade in engineering school. I did meet my wife because of it, so it's not entirely a waste. I can literally tell you at a near atomic level how a signal propagates over a wire, or as us electrical engineering douches would say, over a waveguide. I can explain the electromagnetic difference between T568A and B, two Ethernet standards, and why there's a 2% difference between them. And I can very helpfully, still with pen and paper and a little bit of pulling open a textbook, do a DTMF calculation so that I can really give you an idea of exactly what that Fourier transform is on your digital to analog conversion, so that we can figure out why your wireless signal isn't propagating. And sure, all of that can help you understand why the Wi-Fi is dropping, but let's be honest, it's absolutely not required, and probably none of you listening to me even know what any of that meant, and you're still able to do that stuff. That kind of knowledge makes you technically accurate, but functionally overqualified for most of what real-world IT demands. It never helped me answer a user's ticket faster. It never made a server migration less painful. It never made a client respect me more, although I definitely tried to use it that way. It definitely never got me out of a service call on a Friday afternoon. It's not that it made me worse. It's just the law of diminishing returns. The improvements were so esoteric, so marginal, that my college education became effectively a non-factor in doing good, scalable, supportable IT. What helped more than anything was a willingness to poke around, troubleshoot with curiosity, and get the damn thing working. Now, I'll be honest. If you follow my normal content, I am an ops guy. I've been in the MSP space for a while, and I am absolutely of the school of there is a known good way to do something, and you should learn the known good way before you go off and fuck around. I know the importance of repeatability, documentation, and process. Reliable IT isn't optional when you're managing dozens of clients and techs. If you can't scale it, someone else can't pick it up from you or from your notes. If the next person can't pop in right where you were and pick up, and if it only works when you touch it, that's not a solution, that's a liability. But let's be very, very clear, especially if you are new to this industry, new to IT, or you're pivoting into a new role in IT. This really needs to be said more often. None of what I just said is the requirement of being an IT professional. It's the responsibility of a professional, but it's not the barrier to entry. The discipline comes later. You earn it or learn it or build it into muscle memory, but none of that changes the fact that you are solving problems and making tech work. You are already in the club. You are already an IT professional. Some of you may know I like to do a lot of woodworking, and there's a lot of parallels between that industry and this industry. Technically, joining two pieces of wood together, literally in any way, is woodworking. But we all know This Old House, Norm Abrams, New Yankee Workshop, there's a right way to do it, right? Chisels and hand planes and all that. And there's kind of this mythos in the woodworking industry that until you get to the point where you can sort of hand make dovetail joinery, you are not a real woodworker. You don't know fine woodworking, which is absolute bullshit because most of us cannot do that and can easily cobble together a bench or a box or an IKEA table, and all of that counts as woodworking. So a woodworker I like had this analogy where he broke down the four actual most essential joints of woodworking. We basically said, not all the fancy shit. What are the most basic things you need to be able to actually be a real woodworker? And I kind of have that same vibe here for IT. First of all, click, next, finish joinery, aka following a wizard or a guide. If it works, why fight it? There's nothing wrong with this, my friend. You are no less of an IT professional if you follow and click along through a setup guide. The whole WYSIWYG wizard area. I'll just make a point right now. I'm a WYSIWYG guy. I can run circles around some of you that have 20 years in HTML or PHP or some other fancy product. Just because you can do it by hand doesn't make you any better than somebody who can turn on a template or can just click and drag stuff. So real techs use the GUI. Don't let the haters tell you different, but there's nothing wrong if you want to learn to do it without the GUI, and that's awesome too. Google and Gut, listen, that's what we have now. Back in the day, it wasn't Google and Gut, it was magazines and books and Gut, but the vibe's still the same. The most powerful troubleshooting combo is going to be understanding where to look for information and how to apply your gut troubleshooting instinct to that information you found. Even the best do that. And the modern version of being in an actual shop is the Slack assist. Just saying to someone else, hey, does this look right to you? Peer review saves careers. These are the IT joinery that built empires. They're ugly, they're fast, but they're effective. And they don't make you any less of an IT professional. In everything I've just said, that's why if you work at an MSP, if you work in the internal IT department, your manager, team lead, your MSP owner, all of them kind of wish every single one of you would just go home and spin up a home lab and do a bunch of FAFO. And the reason for that, even though a lot of us don't say it out loud, is we're yearning for that energy. We might be snobs in our ivory towers up here, you know, with our PowerShell mastery, or, yes, all of my VLANs are tagged perfectly, but really we want you to go home and to break shit and to figure it out and come in with some abomination that works and it shouldn't. That attitude of screw the rules, I'm going to plug this in and see what happens. That fearless curiosity, that rogue switch flashing in a bedroom closet because you wanted to see what's going to happen if I plug one in at home. Can I chain two routers behind the one my ISP gave me? That home-built domain controller that doesn't work, it is nonsense and is just running off your Synology. We want that spark because the truth is most of us came up the exact same way. Breaking things, fixing them wrong, solving problems with parts that weren't meant to go together. We weren't trained to follow best practices. We failed into them. And that's why we push so hard now for documentation, for standards, and for doing it the right way. Once you're on the job, because we know firsthand what it looked like before all of that. And we're quietly hoping that some reckless, brilliant, chaotic spirit lives in the next generation is going to bring that in, hopefully take the lessons we learned and make something even better. Nobody's going to thank you for the days when nothing broke. They won't throw a parade when your backup actually restores clean. They won't even notice the network's been perfect for 11 months. You'll know. You'll remember the chaos, the effort, the caffeine, the chat threads. And you'll know that you made it work. Not because you had the fanciest tools. Not because you had the right stack. Not because there was a skill you had or didn't have. Because you knew how to figure it out. That's real IT. You don't need permission. You don't need purity. You just need to keep going. So don't let anyone gatekeep your career, your knowledge, or your style. Don't let some guy in a forum with 6 monitors, 2 of which are vertical, and a superiority complex make you feel like you don't belong. Don't make yourself feel like you don't belong. Don't look at someone else who's had years, experience, training, money, who knows, and hold them up as the only way I belong, as if I am them. Don't do that to yourself either. You do belong. You're already doing it. You are real IT. I'm wearing my Nostromo hat here, not only because the Aliens franchise is my single favorite movie franchise, as it blends the two best genres, horror and sci-fi, together, but because the first time I saw Alien on TV when I was a kid, without my parents knowing, when I wasn't supposed to, in black and white, because I only had a black and white TV then, besides scaring the literal crap out of me. And the computers made this noise when text appeared on the screen that me in the early 80s, computers didn't do that. And I spent the longest time tinkering at home with this Tandy we were borrowing, trying to figure out why the text on the screen didn't make the noise the text on the screen in Alien made. So there you go.